Welcome to Commercial Conversations Over Coffee, the show where two college dropouts turned real estate millionaires discuss all aspects of commercial real estate investing. Now, welcome your hosts, Tyler Cobble and apartment guy Bruce Peterson.
All right, I think we should start this episode off a little bit differently because Bruce and I were just having a chat before we went live, and we were talking about the man in the arena, which is one of my favorite quotes of all time. And a buddy of mine, actually one of our partners, told me about it, within the last 2 to 4 weeks. And Bruce just brought it up randomly, and I was like, man, we need to read that to the audience because it's one of the most impactful quotes. And I think that as real estate investors, it's one of the most applicable, motivational quotes you'll ever hear. So, Bruce, you want to read that off for everybody?
Yeah, I'm going to be a cheeseball about it, but that's okay. It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or whether the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes up short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds? Who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions? Who spends himself in a worthy cause? Who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement? And who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly? So that is his place. So that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. Dude, I absolutely love everything about that because for anybody that's trying to build a personal brand or, kind of make something better of yourself, you're going to have haters all the time that just try to tear you down because it makes themselves feel better. Screw them.
Yeah.
Get out there, bust your ass. You're going to get kicked in the nuts. You're going to get bloodied. It's going to happen. But you're out there making a better life for yourself and your family and those around you, your community. So let people bitch and want to tear you down. Doesn't bother me. I'm still doing me. You're still going to work at 7-Eleven tomorrow. That's fine. I don't care.
Dude, it gives me chills every time I hear that. It's a Teddy Roosevelt quote, by the way. And I mean, there's just that last line, those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat. I mean, look, the quote is about getting out there and doing it. If you fall on your face, at least you tried. And, we were going through this capital raise when our partner, our good friend, Jamie, first read this quote to me because, it was this capital raise that we just finalized was 10 times larger than any capital raise I've ever done. That's a lot. And, even though I go into it and Bruce is like, are you sure you want to do this? Of course, man, it's going to be easy. Well, it's not. It never is. And, I just felt like I kept falling on my face. And Jamie was like, no, man, you're the man in the arena. I was like, what is that? And he read that quote to me. And honestly, that's what juiced me up to get across the finish line on this. Because you know what? I would rather go out and fail spectacularly and at least have tried than to sit on my couch in my underwear playing video games going, oh, I could never raise $4.8 million. I'm just going to hang out here and not worry about it.
Or hate on the people that are out there trying to do it. That's what really gets me is that you're going to tear me down for trying to do something that either you're scared to do, you don't think you can do, or you're just too damn lazy to do. But you're going to sit there behind a keyboard. I was telling you earlier about a guy probably 2 to 4 months ago that posted on social media a picture of my book in his trash can. Like, okay, fine. I reached out to him. And he's like, I was like, look, dude.
Just floored that you actually reached out to him about it.
Yeah, and I didn't reach out because I was angry, but I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to hide from anybody. So I reached out to him. He said, oh, hey, no, nothing personal. I was like, dude, there's no way to take that anyway but personal. But you know what, dude?
It's totally personal.
I don't care. I'm fine. And then he came back later, hey, if this and can I? It's like, crickets. Like, now you want something from me? Like, I almost said a really bad word that starts with the letter F. But no, dude, lots of books have been written, lots of studies have been done, and lots of interviews of people on their deathbed. And the big takeaway is always, I wish I had have. I wish I'd have tried. It's regret of things that you didn't do, didn't try, didn't accomplish. Why? Try it. If it's not going to put you under a bridge, if it's not going to threaten the existence of you and or your family, I mean, you got to try. If you're not happy with what you're doing, don't just try to tear others down that are trying to do something that you're too scared to. Dude, you got to go out there and try it yourself. If I can do it, well, hell, you can do it. We've talked about this, Tyler, and it's in my book. It's everywhere. I'm a poor kid, no education, well, no college education, and I was in retail for almost 20 years. I did something. Well, why the hell can't you do something? So, yeah. So, yeah, powerful, powerful quote. It's one of my favorites as well. And I was going to say I try to live by it. It's not that I try to live by it, but it's just the way you and I both go about our business. We're going to screw some stuff up. We're going to fail from time to time. It's okay. But, then let's go back to something that Tony Robbins said in Unlimited Power. There is no such thing as failure. And I'll qualify that in a second too, but there's no such thing as failure to him. He says everything is the result of an action. That's it. It's not a failure. You did something. You got a result. The result's not what you wanted. Well, it's not a failure. You were successful in creating the result from your action. That's it. You don't like the result? Fine. Try other actions. Keep trying other actions until you get the results you want. You don't fail. The only way to me that you can fail is if you don't even try. That to me is failing. Living day by day, huddle in your bedroom, like you said, playing video games, smoking weed, whatever you're going to do. That to me is failing because you're not living up to your potential. So outside of that, there is no such thing as failure. Just keep trying until things pop. They will.
Yeah, I'm going to add to that. I mean, in my opinion, too, failure, you only fail when you don't learn from whatever you've just gone through. There's always a lesson and there's always a way to get better. And I think that, yeah, okay, well, maybe you didn't, raise enough capital to pull out that deal and you had to terminate it at the last minute. But if you learned that, okay, I need to start my capital raise sooner next time, and I've got to have better marketing materials and an offering memorandum so that my investors can really understand the picture, and you're willing to go give it another shot, that's not a failure. I mean, that is a wonderful learning lesson. And the thing is, too, look, we're doing real estate, man. This isn't life or death. I was having a conversation with my buddy Mark last night, and so I've got 3 really close friends, and we go on vacations together all the time. We all run our own businesses, so we're all, in this very similar walk of life. And we made a pact the other night to go on vacation together 4 times a year. There's 4 of us. Each person gets a quarter. And it's funny, this came up because of that show. Oh gosh, was it Pranksters or something like that? Where there's like 4 friends that
Impractical Jokers.
Yeah, Impractical Jokers. Yeah, it came up because somebody brought that up, and we just started talking about it. We were like, well, we like to vacation together. Let's come up with a pact similar to what they did, where once a year I get to choose a vacation, and those 3 guys have to show up. And if I want to go shark diving or jump out of an airplane, which I would never do, then they have to do it. And like, it's kind of one of those, we're doing these experiences with each other because it's cool to do that with your buddies, right? And so my buddy Mark was talking last night and to me about this, and he's like, okay, so you almost just lost $120,000 on a deal. I mean, guys, I know we've talked about this before. I came this close. I mean, it was literally within 24 hours of me losing 6 figures. He was like, so you're willing to bet everything and lose all of that money, but you're not willing to jump out of an airplane? And I was like, hell no, I'm not going to jump out of an airplane. I'm willing to bet all my money because it's just a game at the end of the day. Like, that's all business is. It's not life or death. I think it's really important to keep that in mind when you're looking at this stuff. Like, it helps ground you and ground your perspective. It's just business, right? Like, you can always go make another dollar. Now, don't lose other people's money, but you can always go make yourself another dollar.
Right. And, when I talk about this a lot on other people's podcasts or on a stage, I might be being interviewed somewhere, and we get onto this topic that, just get out there, take a chance, right? You're talking about you were willing to put all your money on the line. And I always kind of back up my statements similar to that with, look, when I got started in real estate, I was different than many of you. I had a fair amount of cash, but I had no family. And it was just me. I had no dogs or, cats or anything. I had no animals that if things didn't work out, it only negatively impacted me. So I realized that maybe that's not a fair comparison between me and the person listening to me because maybe they do have a family. They have lots to lose. So, but you can still take chances that don't put your family at risk. You know, like I said, don't risk everything because now your wife, your kids are going to be negatively impacted. But if it's just you, you've got a lot more flexibility, which I did have. But the point is, you got to get out and try. Just try something. Try to make something better. If you don't make yourself better, if you're not always trying to strive to make yourself better, it's called atrophy. Atrophy kills. You quit working out, your muscles start to wither. It's the same thing. If you quit working on creativity or just trying to better yourself, that stuff will slowly start to die. You can reignite it, right? But it's hard. You've got to keep pushing forward, not get stuck in your life and just sit back. It's the vision board thing, right? What do you want out of your life? Even if you're 50 years old, I'm 52. Even if you're 50 years old, you could still make a change. Bruce, I'm too old. No, you're not. Dude, with today's medical advancements and all that, we're all going to live probably until about 100 to 120 is my assumption. Well, maybe we won't all make it there, but that's my belief that if we're going to live to be 120 years old and you're 50, you haven't even lived half your life. Keep things in perspective. You have to take care of your health, make sure that you can make it to 120 or even 80 or 90 in good health and be still vibrant. But man, again, I'm beating this to death, right? It's getting old. We need to move on probably. But yeah, get out there and take a chance. Try something different. Again, you don't fail. You just got a result. Find another action you can take to maybe get a different result. That's it.
Well, look, I mean, I'm single, no pets, 28. I still live with a buddy, right? I rent a room from him. I I make plenty of money, and I have a solid net worth. But to me, the flexibility that allows, I can go take these risks without, I don't have a mortgage, right? I don't have to worry about coming home and paying for that if everything goes bad. I don't have pets, right? I don't have to leave work in the middle of a meeting or whatever to go let a dog out. I don't have any kids to worry about. I'm not married. I don't have a spouse to answer to. So it gives me the flexibility to go all in on what I'm doing. And I think it's healthy to understand that there are walks of life. And it is totally okay for you to be in that position. There will be a time to, get married and settle down and take less risk. But when you're young and you're single and you have the opportunity to do that, if you waste that, you're doing yourself a disservice, in my opinion.
Right. Don't spend your 20s smoking weed, hanging out with your friends, and just partying all the time. If that's what you want to do for your entire life, okay, go be Bob Marley and maybe write some music on a
Or
beach
Seth
somewhere.
Rogen.
That's totally fine,
Yeah.
though. But again, it's perspective and it's what we all want. We're all driven by different things. If that's what you want permanently in your life, totally fine. But if you really want to make a difference in the world, if you really want to do something big with your life, don't piss away your 20s, like you're saying. This is when you should be trying things, taking the big risks that are harder to take when you're 40 and 50 with a full family. You can still take calculated risks when you're in that position, but when you're in your 20s with no real obligations, many of you aren't owning your own homes right now. It might not for a while. You don't have kids that you have to worry about. This is the time. You got to get out Gary Vaynerchuk, right? Taste everything. Try everything that you think might be interesting to you. Most of it won't work out, but you just keep testing, keep trying until you find the thing that works for you. And, for the people that are in their 40s or 50s and do have the family, you know, aren't you tired? Because many of my friends are in this position. Aren't you tired of always having to figuratively look over your shoulder? When are they going to show up at my cubicle with a pink slip? When am I going to get outsourced, downsized? Again, many people have had that happen 2, 3, 4 times, especially in the tech industry, which is very prevalent in Austin. Aren't you tired of that? Don't you want more control of your life? You have to go crawl to your boss for a raise every year. Hopefully they'll give you a cost of living increase of 2 to 4%. If you want anything more than that, oh, man, that's tough for most people. Um, when you're an entrepreneur, you're in charge of your own destiny. Now, understandably, there is a degree of financial risk, right? You're starting something new, but I would argue there's a lot of risk working for somebody else too. How many people got laid off during COVID? That I have a safe job. This is more conservative, and how many of you lost your job? How safe is it when somebody else controls your financial life? Jim Carrey has a talk that he gave, and I'm going to paraphrase this and probably butcher the hell out of it, but he's talking about his dad. His dad was an attorney when he was a kid. I mean, not an attorney, I'm sorry, a CPA, an accountant. And he had this safe job. He never wanted to take a chance and get outside of his comfort zone because he had a sure thing. Well, I think it was 20, 25 years into his career, he got fired and or let go, maybe downsized, outsourced, whatever. And it made him understand that, look, son, you can fail at doing something you hate. Why not try something you love? Right? There's no guarantees in life, even when you work for somebody else. Even if you work for the government, even if you work for the largest company in the world, you can still get let go. You can still get fired, if something goes wrong. You could get sick and not be able to do that job anymore. You need to take control of your life, however that looks for you. But there are ways to take control of your financial future and your life and not put it in somebody else's hands.
Yeah. And speaking of taking control of your life, today's episode is talking about how to prep yourself for your first deal. I think there's knowledge that goes into that. You need to understand and know the process, but you also need to mentally prepare yourself for your first deal. There's a lot that goes into that. I mean, like we just said earlier, raising capital is not easy. That's a lot of work. One of the great things about doing your own deal, obviously, is like Bruce was saying, you're your own boss. Now, you do have to answer to investors to a certain extent. Otherwise, you won't be able to raise capital ever again. But there are healthy ways of setting boundaries with those investors so that they know when and how they can approach you. Other than that, you're on your own. You are your own boss. So, Bruce, when you were setting out to do your first deal, we've talked about you joined a mastermind, but what was your step-by-step process for getting into, one, how did you gain the knowledge? Two, how did you mentally prepare yourself?
So the knowledge came from, I found a good coach. I was part of masterminds along the way too, but it was basically a coach. I found a good, qualified, experienced coach that was very successful in doing what I was trying to learn how to do. So I worked with her for probably about 9 to 12 months, trying to get everything kind of straight in my brain. What does a cash on cash return mean? I'm used to the stock market. I was a stockbroker in the early 90s for a year, right? Until I quit that because I hated it. But so I know something about money and investing, but I don't know what a cash on cash return is because that's not the way the stock market works. I don't understand IRR. I don't understand a lot of things. So I have to learn what it is to invest in apartment complexes. But I worked with her. And one thing that I did that really helped. Now, she got me most of my knowledge, probably 80% of my knowledge. But then 20 to maybe 30% of it came from the apartment association, right? So every major city has an apartment association that you can join. And they have all kinds of education. So I took something called the Certified Apartment Manager course, or the CAM course. And it was teaching me basically how to be an on-site property manager. Now, I'm never going to be an on-site property manager, but I knew it was important for me to understand as much about the industry as I could because I knew at some point in the future I was probably going to hire my own property management team. And I needed to know what they are expected to do, what their jobs were. So I know how to hold them accountable. So I know what they should be doing on a day-to-day basis. So I want that step as well. It might have been $100 or $200 for the year, I think. And I think the CAM course was about $750 to $1,000. It's not cheap, but it was important. Again, go back to you'll give somebody $50,000 to $250,000 for a college education that you might not use. It's the same thing. I'm paying for education. So those are the things that I did to get myself ready. And what was the second part of that question?
Mentally, how did you prepare yourself mentally to take that leap? I mean,
Well,
that's nerve wracking, you know?
right. So again, it goes back to the man in the ring, right? I don't want to live my life with regrets. But honestly, so two things here. Remember, I talked about this. I didn't have a family. It was a little easier for me. I own that. I get it. It was easier for me to do it because I had nobody relying upon me for anything except myself. But aside from that, I knew that everything else I had ever attempted in life, like most everybody listening to this, I've been successful at. Because anything that I really try, I really, really, really give it my 100% effort. So I knew that this was just the next thing that I didn't understand, that I didn't know. So I just had to go out and learn it. And I was confident that even though I don't have any clue what any of this is about, all I have to do is learn it. And I have experienced people around me. My coach, she had a background in brokerage, she had a background in property management. So she was very well qualified to teach me. I learned from her. And again, just applied everything that she taught me. But I knew that it's going to get scary. I knew there were going to be things that are going to pop up that I was not prepared for, but I had faith that I could get through it because I would lean on her and I would seek out the answers. So that was really what it was. I had faith in myself. I wasn't doing anything else that I enjoyed. So I thought, well, let's give something else a try. Again, take another action. What is that result? So this was just the next thing to go into. And it's the best thing I've ever done. It's not been easy by any means, but I applied myself. I've been doing it for about 10 years now. Um, and while I don't have an advanced degree, while I don't have a formal education, I'm always learning. I'm always reading books, reading blogs, going to conferences, talking with other people doing what I'm doing. And at the beginning, again, I hired a coach. So that's what I did to get over that mental barrier that, oh my God, I might fail. I never considered I would fail. There was complete conviction because I saw people around me doing what I was trying to learn how to do. And I figured, well, somebody's doing it successfully. You hear a lot of people say, oh, it doesn't work. It's tenants, toilets, and taxes or whatever it is. Oh, that's crap. You're on call all the time. No, you're doing it wrong then. I talked to people that knew the right way to do it. So I didn't get the call at 2 o'clock in the morning from somebody whose toilet was backed up. You know, I knew the right way to go about structuring this as a business. So again, I went into it, set it up the right way, knew that things were going to go wrong, but I still had conviction and confidence in my ability to listen to others and to get it right eventually.
Yeah, education is so important. It's funny, obviously Bruce dropped out of college. I dropped out of college. But, you have a conversation with Bruce about numbers and underwriting and deal, and you'd think that he was a CPA. I mean, he's incredible with a calculator, but it's because he has spent time getting as educated on how to manipulate those numbers as much as he can, because if he can do that, he can figure out how to make a deal work faster than the next investor, which means he has the opportunity to run at that. And also just the mental, energy drain of being able to quickly do those calculations instead of having to sit there and think about it and learn about it and this and that. I mean, he pulls out a calculator and in 5 seconds he'll go, nope, we're not doing that because the cost per door and this and that. And, here's what the taxes will be. And it's like, that doesn't make any sense. I think, when I did my first deal, I took a different approach than Bruce did, right? I was a commercial real estate broker for 4.5 years, 5 years before I did my first deal. And now, granted, I was 26, so, but I don't think age is an excuse to say, oh, well, it took me 5 years to figure it out. Honestly, I didn't have a good investor influence in my life, and I wish that I had sought that out a little bit earlier, because I just didn't have the confidence that I could do it. And now that, Bruce and I are working together, he's having to hold me back because I'm like, well, let's go buy this. Let's buy that. Let's go buy this. What if we do this? Let's do that. Let's do that. It's funny how, like, once you get the confidence in doing a deal, I mean, you almost have to restrain yourself because you start seeing deals everywhere and you're confident enough that you can pull it off. But, I listened to podcasts, I read books, I took classes, I went through several CCIM designation courses, and, I just always felt like, oh, well, there's going to be one more book, there's one more podcast, there's one more meeting over coffee that I can have, and then I'll get it. And of course it's good. You have to get educated, right? But don't let that education hold you back, or your feeling of lack of education, because you will learn more from actually buying and doing a deal than you ever will out of that book, than you ever will out of whatever that conversation is you have over coffee, or whatever that podcast says. You will. I mean, so it took me 5 years to do that deal, and I wouldn't have done it if I hadn't gotten pushed off the ledge. And so, I'll recognize that. I think at some point, somebody has to push you off the ledge. If it's not going to be yourself, there has to be some external force that does it, right? A client had brought me this building. It was a little 6,000 square foot office. It was super cool. It was actually designed by the same architect that did the Batman building in Nashville, Earl Swenson. And he's a Nashville native. And so, to me, like, immediately I was like, oh, that's so cool. Like, it's a piece of Nashville history. And, he wanted to buy the building and put his startup in there. And so we put it under contract, and I started inspecting the building with him, and I just started really falling in love with the area. It was in a part of town I hadn't spent a whole lot of time in. And he ended up not being able to finance the deal. And so he called me and just said, hey, we're going to need to terminate because I can't, I'm not going to be able to do this project. And I'm looking at this going, well, hell, it's a $600,000 deal. I'm getting paid 3%. That's $18,000. We've got to figure this out. I'm not going to let this deal fall through the cracks. So I called another investor of mine, told him, what I liked about the building and this and that. And so he was like, yeah, assign it to me. Let's go. Let's do the project. I mean, for whatever reason, he also couldn't get his financing. I mean, we spent another 2 or 3 months, looking at the building. Again, I'm falling more and more in love with the area. I don't let the emotional side of it affect my decision making. I just see there's an opportunity here that nobody else is seeing. And so when he calls me to tell me that his financing fell through, I'm like, God damn it, like, just assign the contract to me and I'll figure this out. And honestly, like, that's what it took. That's it. It was honestly that easy. As soon as I signed that assignment and I knew that my name was on the contract, I got to work. I made a couple of phone calls, found 2 investors that were willing to throw some money into the deal, and we were off to the races. And, I'm sure you guys have heard me say this, but that year I bought 3 more buildings. One was 12,000 feet, one was 4,000 feet, and the other one was 28,000 feet. So just went on this rampage, right? Because I realized that I could do it. And, I think as far as the mental preparation goes, I mean, for me, it was a lot of psyching myself up. I think that, you look over the ledge and you see all these people flying, but you don't want to drop and not fly, right? And so you don't want to take that jump. And, I was fortunate enough to have a little shove in the back. I just fell off and started flying. And I think that sometimes it takes that. But, man, if I could go back and start investing sooner, I would. I've got, people reach out to me on Instagram all the time, 18-year-old kids that are like asking me, hey, man, how can I get started at, investing in commercial real estate? And I just think, I always tell them, like, man, if I was even thinking about that at your age, I would be so far ahead of where I am now that it's crazy. I love that people are starting to think about that at younger and younger ages. You should.
So take that and add 24 years to it, kid. If I had started when you started at 26. I started at my first purchase was 2012, so I started at 44 was my first purchase. So yeah, if I had started at 26, 18 years earlier, oh dude, yeah, we can all say that, but I don't want people to hear that and go, oh crap, I didn't start earlier. I should have started. Start now. Like I said, even if you're 50, it doesn't matter. It's never too late. Unless up here it's too late. If it's too late in your own mind, well, then don't even try, right? It's that negative self-speak that, oh, I'm too old. Okay, yeah, you're right. You're too old. Yet there's a 70-year-old down the street, an 80-year-old down the street, a 90-year-old around the corner that's still doing it. But you're right. It's too late for you. You're too old. Whatever, dude. It always, not always, but almost always goes back to mindset. You need perspective. Are you happy with where you are now? No. Well, then make a change. Or do you have the flexibility you want? No. Well, then make a change. anyways, I'll beat that to death again too. So the mindset is big. You've got to get to a point where you feel comfortable. But one thing was important that you kind of brought up was, you didn't do it the way I did it, and that's the beauty of it. There's no right way. It's just start making moves, move forward, start learning. You got to stop your learning at some point because there's always going to be another book you can find. There's always going to be another podcast you can listen to that's comfortable, right? It's not scary to listen to a podcast. And people fall into, oh, no, no, like you said, well, there's just that one little bit left that I don't know that I got to figure out what that is. And then I got to go learn that. And then I'll be ready. You're going to learn more. You got to get enough to get started. But then once you have enough basic knowledge to get started, then you just got to start. And you're never going to get where Tyler and I are if you don't start. You'll still work for somebody else in a cubicle or at McDonald's and not make the money you thought you were going to make, not have the life you thought you would have, be able to travel, be able to give to your charities of choice. You're just delaying that. Because if you'll get out there and try, it'll all work out for you. It will. You just got to keep pushing until the right thing pops for you. Because real estate was not my first thing. I had a commercial cleaning business. I had a product assembly business. I had a mail services company business. So this was not the first thing I'd ever tried. Nothing else ever worked, at least not to the scale that I had hoped it would work. So I sold some companies for a very small amount of money. Some of them just didn't work out at all, and I shut them down. But I kept trying, even when I was working at retail. I was working lots of hours in retail. This was before my last year where I was working 80 to 110-hour weeks. But before that, I was working 50 to 60-hour weeks for, 10 years. But that still gave me time to get off at 5, 6 o'clock in the evening, get some food. And then I had 2 to 4 hours before I needed to go to bed. So I had plenty of time to keep working on stuff on the side. So a lot of people say, oh, I don't have time. Yeah, you do. But I have kids. You didn't have kids. Okay, come home at your 5, 6, 7 o'clock hour, eat dinner, be done with dinner, say by 8 o'clock, put the kids in bed at 8 or 9. And then you have from 8 o'clock to midnight, 9 o'clock to midnight or 1, whatever. You might not get 8 to 10 hours of sleep. How bad do you want this? Do you really want to make a difference? If you do, dude, there's tons of time. You have more time than you're telling yourself you do. You're just finding the next excuse for not doing it. Well, but then I can't watch Dancing with the Stars. Oh, okay, keep doing what you're doing. I hope it works out for you. So let's get into some more of the tactical stuff, right? So
we can't tell people they've got to miss Dancing with the Stars, man. That's just mean.
Or Survivor, or I've got my guilty pleasures too, but it doesn't interfere with my working on my business. And moving myself forward. I always have that comes first. And any extra time, then I'll work in Gold Rush or Shark Tank or The Profit. Wow, most of mine are based around money. That's funny. Okay.
Yeah, but I was going to say that's all I watch.
Like. Exactly. So that's good stuff. But let's talk about
if I'm gonna burn time watching TV, we're gonna do that. But yes, I agree. Let's get into actually actionable steps, because one of my most frustrating pieces of podcasts or books or whatever. Honestly, this is why I can't stand Gary Vee. He always, and I know you love him. I know you love him, but dude, he is always like, oh, just get out there and do it. Just go and do it. And I'm like, okay, well, that's great, but that doesn't help any of the people. Maybe I do want to go out there and do it, but I don't know how. There's just a lot of gurus that just say, just get out there and do it.
Broad audience. We're talking to a pretty specific audience, so we can deep dive. It's hard for him to say, you need to go do this, because everybody's trying different industries. But anyways, I'm going to quit being an apologist. I love that dude. If you don't know who he is, you have to look up Gary Vaynerchuk. He will. If you really are an aspiring entrepreneur, you have ideas, but you're scared, you got to listen to him. He's going to break things down in a way that makes you go, oh yeah, I hadn't thought about that way. But anyway, so
come on, you listened to one episode of Gary Vaynerchuk talking, and you've heard every single one. It's the same damn message every time.
But how many people don't apply what they hear the first time?
Oh, right? Well, look, that's why I'm totally fine pulling back the curtain and sharing how to invest in commercial real estate and underwrite deals and do this and do that. Because, I was telling some people this the other day, that, they had called me because they were in Nashville and they were, listeners of the podcast. And they wanted to sit down and they asked me why I was sharing all this. I was just like, honestly, because I know that the overwhelming majority of people that I will tell how to do this will not do it, and they will not become my competition. They just won't. So I'm totally fine doing that. Whereas most commercial real estate developers, brokers, investors, whatever, they don't like sharing anything because they're afraid of creating competition. They don't want to do this. They don't want to do that. But I'm fine with it. Let's go. Let's walk through some actionable steps. What is the first actionable step you would take to prepare for your first deal?
So the first thing you have to do, there's no option. There's no way around it. Well, okay, let me put that into context too, right? Depends on how you want to go about this. Do you just want to go out and buy your own single family rental? Do you want to go out and buy your own small apartment complex because maybe you have a couple $100,000 saved up, 500, whatever? Or do you want to syndicate something? If you want to syndicate something, you have to start with the investors. You have got to start building a database of prospective investors. The key word there is prospective because you don't know for sure they're going to come in. That's why you have to raise a lot more money than you think you're going to need because a lot of these people won't come through for you at the end, but it has to start with the database. And we've talked about raising money before, that you need to go where people are that are open to the thoughts of real estate investing. And you just got to start networking. The meetups, and again, we always have to preface this right now with COVID, right? We're in COVID times. I get that, but there are still ways to do this virtually. There are virtual meetups. There's Facebook groups you can get into, listen to podcasts that hopefully someday you'll be able to work yourself onto a podcast. That will help you grow your database. But you got to start working on that database. Again, let's say you back into a number, think, okay, I want to get started at a property that's 50 units. You know, if you're working with a coach, you can back that into about what it's going to take monetarily to buy that deal. So a 50 unit deal in Austin, Texas might run you, $2 million out of pocket. So if you think it's going to cost you $2 million, you probably need to double or triple that in your database because, again, many, many, many people at the beginning are not going to come through when you finally present them with a deal. But you have to start with the database. That's where it all starts. And then you start putting all the pieces together around it, all the kind of the tactical pieces. But if you don't start with the investors, nothing works if you're going to syndicate. If you aren't going to syndicate, well, then you got to find people to start connecting with in the industry. You've got to find a good mortgage broker. You need to find a good real estate broker. You need to find attorneys. So you need to start finding people that are going to be on your team as you go through this. People, well, how do I find those? I'm not in this industry. This is all new to me. I don't know how to, just Yellow Pages. First of all, there are no Yellow Pages anymore, but don't just start Googling.
Wow,
either.
Way to age yourself.
That's not that long ago, jerk. But so that's again where you have to be networking. It's not just to raise money. It's to find out, well, who did you use as your PPM attorney? Again, if you're not going to syndicate, well, who did you use for your real estate attorney? Who did you use as your CPA? What are the brokers locally that will have all the listings where I live? Again, it always goes back to networking. You have to network to start building that team.
Yeah, well, I want to unpack each of those individually and talk about how to approach a lender, how to find an attorney, how to talk to a broker. Because I think it would be good for us to dive in and help strategize, because a lot of people don't know how to build relationships with a broker. Well, in multifamily, if you don't have a good relationship with a broker, you'll probably never see any good deals. It's just how it is. But before we get into any of that, I think after you've got your investor base, you need to learn how to underwrite a deal. I mean, you need to be able to run the numbers back and forth and back. I mean, you've got to know it inside and out because it doesn't matter if you can get lending terms or if your broker is bringing you a deal or if you have investors, if you can't put a good deal worth investing in front of anybody, right? And so you need to know how to break down those numbers and figure that out. I mean, Bruce and I have some software that we've put together. It was a multifamily spreadsheet that he uses on all of his apartment acquisitions. And I took it and modified it for office, retail, and industrial properties. And we use that on every single deal. I mean, we used it to acquire the tower that we just bought on Monday. But, dropping that one in. We bought a tower on Monday. That was fun. But
2 towers, really.
Yeah,
One project with 2 towers.
That's right. Yeah. We bought some property out in Chattanooga, Tennessee, about 2 hours from Nashville. I'm really excited about that. I mean, Chattanooga, it was listed as one of the niche markets that ULI said like to look at this year. I think it was like one of 5 markets in the country that was a niche market. But they've got the best internet in the country because the entire fiber is treated like a utility there. I don't know if that's actually true, but it seems that way because fiber is throughout the entire city, and it has been for like 10 years. And so you think about the tech startup opportunities there, it's far more affordable. It's basically a mix between Denver and Nashville. And every time I tell people that, they're like, wow, that's the best way I've ever heard Chattanooga described. It's very true because it's got that really cool, hip, outdoorsy feel, but it's still a southern, city. So,
Well,
yeah,
hang
anyway.
hang on. Now, we're going to tie this back to my buddy here, right? Vaynerchuk has an office right around the corner.
He does.
He's a smart dude, and he's there too. So that just speaks to, Chattanooga is a great market if you can get in.
He's been living on Chattanooga for like 5 years now. I mean, he was doing videos down in Chattanooga talking about how it was the next big thing, like back in 15 and 16, which is it was crazy when I went back and saw that. But so learn how to underwrite. I mean, you've got to know, what the numbers are in the area, for rent. You've got to know what your operating expenses are. You've got to know how the mortgage and interest rates and interest only periods will impact your cash on cash returns. And having a piece of software or a spreadsheet to help you with all of that I would highly recommend it. I mean, hell, I don't know how to do all those damn numbers in my head, but Bruce created this spreadsheet that mostly, aside from user error, spouts it out every time where it needs to be, right? I mean,
it's a spreadsheet, right? So it's got lots of formulas built in, lots of macros built in and all that. But I want to back up now that you said, now that you've got your database, no, I honestly think you need to be doing it together, right? You got to walk and chew bubble gum at the same time. So you need to be working on your education while you're doing it. So don't get I don't think you meant it that way, but that's the way I heard it. That while you're building your database of prospective investors, you have to be working on your education at the same time. I think they have to happen at the same time because this is not linear. You check the first box, you get that nailed, then you go to the second. No, there's lots of stuff you have to be working on at the same time. While you are learning how to do this, you also need to start developing relationships with brokers and lenders and all that as well. So you need to figure out how to get connected to the local brokers in your area. Most all transactions go through, 4 to 6, maybe 8 big brokers in each individual town. And you have to figure out how to get in touch with them, how to get in front of them. It's not usually going to work by wanting to take them to coffee, right? These guys make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. They don't need you to buy them freaking coffee, right? So, but you got to figure out a way to get in front of them. And I think you just start touring their projects, right? Tour the projects that you think they would take you seriously as far as your ability to pull something like that off. If you're brand new and you're 22 years old, don't go walk a 400-unit high-rise in downtown Austin. They know you don't have the wherewithal to pull that shit off. Don't try to act like you can. They're going to realize really quickly you're an idiot. I'm not wasting my time with you. If you go to them, say, look, I see you have this 24-unit listed, on Main Street, and I'd like to tour that. Now, they might believe that you have the wherewithal to pull that off, even if you don't yet, because your education is not totally complete, or it is, but you don't quite have all the investors lined up. They don't necessarily know that, but it has to be a property that they feel kind of fit where you are in your path, I guess, in your journey. But yeah, so go out and start touring properties with brokers. They're going to get to know you personally. They're going to get to know what it is you're looking for. And as those things come across their desk later, there's a chance that they would send it to you before it got listed, send out to hundreds and hundreds of people around the world, because many of these things get marketed internationally. But again, you got to start working on those relationships early on.
Yeah, and we talked a lot about, we dove into building relationships with commercial and multifamily brokers in episode 6. So if you want to dive into that a little bit further, I would highly recommend going and listening to that, because there are a lot of nuances to that. And, if you don't handle that relationship correctly, those brokers will probably never bring you deals. And there are several ways that you can literally get blacklisted by brokers, and they will just never bring you a deal again. They'll, they know better than to waste their time. So, okay, we've learned how to underwrite. We have found a broker. What's next? I would imagine getting an attorney, right? Because if you're going through the process, you've got to get a purchase and sale agreement put together. You're going to have to get PPMs. Honestly, I would probably do that before getting a lender. But how would you approach it, Bruce?
I would go with the lender first because the
Okay.
attorney really truly doesn't come into play until you figure out that, okay, I'm going to make an offer on this deal. They can help you construct the letter of intent or the LOI for that first deal. So you're going to need them when you start actively pursuing deals. But before then, especially if you're going to buy your stuff by yourself, you and your family are just going to go out and buy your own 24 or 36 unit property. Well, you need to know what you should be looking at, because if it's just you and your family, you have limited amounts of capital. And so you go to a mortgage broker. I would recommend a broker. Don't go to a lender directly, because if that lender tells you no, oh crap, now I got to start the whole process over again, go find another. Go to a mortgage broker. They're connected to people. You might know the one person, Johnny, behind the desk, your teller at your local branch, but you're not going to have the connections that these mortgage brokers have. So every deal I've ever done was through a mortgage broker. But when you go to these mortgage brokers, something you're going to have ready for them, you're going to need a bio, right? A resume or a bio. Don't make it a true resume, make it more of a bio. A resume would be, what are your intentions to land a job with a great company with growth opportunities that I can grow. Don't do that crap, right? You're not trying to get a job. A bio, list your relevant experience, even if it's stuff that you don't think applies. Look, if you've managed people, if you've run P&Ls, if you've run businesses, that's basically what apartment ownership is. So, just list all of your relevant experience, any education that you've taken, put that on there. Any awards that maybe you've won that would kind of lend itself to somebody taking you seriously. So you need to get a bio together. You need to get a personal financial statement together. And there's all kinds of free ones online. But that's going to be basically your personal balance sheet. What are your assets? What are your liabilities? And what is your resulting net worth? But it's also going to break down your monthly income, your debt, your bills, all the things, your personal cash flow on a monthly and an annual basis. You need to have that together too. And if by chance you do own, like let's say you're going into multifamily, but you've invested in single family rentals for a few years, list all of that stuff in what's called a schedule of real estate owned, or an SREO. Some people will call it an REO, real estate owned. So you need to come up with that too. Now, many of you just getting started, you're not going to have that stuff, and that's fine. Just be honest about who you are and what you're starting with when you're talking to this mortgage broker, because they're not going to make the yes or no decision for you, but they have to understand your story to effectively present you to that end lender. They probably have a list of 100 to 200, maybe even 300 or 400 different lenders they can farm your loan out to, but they have to know the proper way to package you and the best light without lying. Of course, they're never going to mislead anybody. That's fraud. They can't lie for you, but they need to know how to present you. So again, you need a bio, you need a schedule of real estate owned if you own some real estate, and you need to have a personal financial statement, and then start interviewing a few mortgage brokers. And again, the best way to do this, go to meetups, virtual stuff, go to real estate conferences, and talk to other people that have done it. Who have you used? That's the best way to find these people. But start looking at and finding a good mortgage broker.
Yeah, I think it depends too on the size of deal that you're doing, the type of deal. I mean, I've personally never used a mortgage broker for any of our deals. Now, the majority of what I do is commercial. The majority of what Bruce does is multifamily. So when you're doing multifamily, I would recommend having a mortgage broker. It's a bit of a different beast. You're talking about much larger loan amounts. On development and smaller commercial deals like sub $20 million, your local lenders are going to be the best bet. And because it really all comes down to that local relationship. If anything ever goes wrong, that lender knows you well enough they can go to bat for you at committee. Whereas, if you're sourcing a deal, I mean, obviously Fannie and Freddie are completely different, right? There's just different protocol there. But, if I don't have a relationship with my lender, they're far more likely to call the note if anything goes wrong or if anything goes into default for whatever reason than the guy that, I grab lunch with once a month that, knows me really well, has been around for years, and will go to committee and say, no, look, we shouldn't call this note, and here's why. Having those relationships is critical. But again, it depends on the type and the size of deal you're doing.
Right. So like you said, I think using a mortgage broker in my space, always. But you're right. If you're dealing with something a little bit smaller, very local, the national guys aren't going to know anything about it. If your mortgage broker reaches out to somebody in LA, right, as a lender, well, they don't know Nashville. They might have some high level understandings, all the different national reports that come out to talk about the different markets throughout the nation, but they don't live down the street from the project you're trying to put together. So if it's a smaller deal like that, yeah, you're right. It's always best to have local connections and local relationships. But I would still say that, farm it out. If you're going to go that route, and it's usually going to happen on those smaller deals, talk to two or three different people.
At
Have
least.
more than one person you can fall back on, because one of them might not come through, but the other two would come through. Or maybe all of them can come through with a loan, but now you have three different loan quotes, because these local and regional banks very often will not sell that loan to Fannie and Freddie Mae, if you will, Freddie Mac, if you will. Right. So when you're dealing with the big stuff, what happens is you have somebody like Wells Fargo or a Prudential. They will actually lend the money to you. And then 30 days after they execute that loan with you, they're going to package up all their loans for that month and sell them to Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. That's the way it works. Many of your local and regional banks, they don't work that way. They keep their loans on their own balance sheet. They never sell them. They're what's called a portfolio lender. So they're lending to keep most of those loans on their books. They're not going to sell them to somebody else. So they have a lot more flexibility in the decisions they can make. When you're going to sell them to Fannie and Freddie says, I will only buy loans that are exactly this way every single time without exception. And if it falls outside of those guidelines, you just can't get a loan. So when you're dealing again with those local guys, line up two or three of them and have discussions with them. Don't sign anything with anybody. This goes for a real estate agent, a real estate broker, or these guys. Don't sign an exclusivity agreement with anybody. Farm it out to two or three people. See who comes back with the best terms. Or if only one person comes in, well, at least you talk to three people. So now at least you have somebody to go with. So that's how I think you should go about doing it. But Tyler's right. Not always a mortgage broker, but anytime you're dealing with larger assets, I think you should always go with a mortgage broker.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you absolutely should. It can be really frustrating too dealing with banks. I mean, because we talked to some, larger lenders and some mortgage brokers for a development project that we just closed out. That was the capital raise we were talking about earlier. It's a development deal here in East Nashville, and it's a transitioning neighborhood. And I know the neighborhood incredibly well, inside and out. It's where I live. It's where I work. It's where we've done 90% of our projects. And a group looking at it from out of town is going to look at it on Google Maps and go, we're not going to win on this. Why the hell would you want to do that here? Well, what they can't see, or what they don't know because they're not boots on the ground, they don't know that land has increased 20% annually on this corridor, and that the majority of parcels have actually traded within the last 5 years, which means stuff is starting to happen even though nothing's coming out of the ground. They don't know all of the stuff that has been leased and slightly announced that hasn't popped up yet. They don't know. I mean, there's so many factors like that a non-local group will not know. And I found myself, whenever we were going through these pitches, having to sell these groups on East Nashville. And it was mind-boggling to me. I shouldn't have to do that. I should have to sell them on me and the project, not the part of, not Nashville. So, whenever I took it to several local lenders, and the one that we're probably going to be going with, they saw it and they saw our plans and they said, absolutely, we're in on this. Because they knew it. They got it.
And on that, I took that deal to my mortgage broker that I use for everything. And he goes, dude, I can't help you with that. It's not that it's a terribly small deal, but for the type of deal it was smaller than he could probably line up lending for me on. So it just goes back to that same thing that Tyler had connections locally. They're like, oh yeah, I'll do that all day. I love that. That's exactly the types of loans that we look to put out there, because each bank's going to have their own charter of what they're looking for, what their requirements are. And maybe they're a little too heavy in multifamily and they want to steer more into industrial. Maybe they're too heavy in storage units and they want to steer into medical complexes. So yeah, it's very local that way too.
We've been talking about lending for like 20 minutes, and it just made me realize we need to do a whole damn episode on this.
Yep.
because there's so much that we could dive into, and there's so much that I just didn't understand when I first got started that I'm, still learning some stuff. I think
Well, and
it's
I
an
think
incredibly
that
complicated part of the process.
right, that could be one of our guest appearances, right? We talked about it early on as far as, what we hope to accomplish with this podcast, how it's going to go. I think we should bring somebody in because we work with these people all the time, but it'd be nice to have it come straight from
Yeah.
their mouths exactly what they're looking for. So maybe in the next few episodes, we'll have somebody come on. I've got a couple of mortgage brokers I'd be glad to reach out to, and I'm sure they'd love to do this.
Yeah, I think it'd be a good idea. We could have a mortgage broker on for one episode, and we could just talk about working with mortgage brokers, and do another one where it's how to work with local lenders. I think
Yep.
it's kind of two different tactics, honestly. So yeah, because your mortgage broker's in like California, isn't he? I mean, have you ever even met
Well,
him?
I've got one guy that I use in California, one guy that I use in Texas, and I love them both. So I've sent deals to both of them. They've both provided loans for me in the past. Um, and maybe they don't want to hear that, but they're big boys, right? They understand it's business that, sometimes one will go to one guy, one will go to the other guy. And yeah, I do have backups. I always, always, always have backups. What if the mortgage broker that I always use, first of all, maybe he's a one man guy, a one man office, or maybe he's not a one man office, but he's the one in that one office that I always use and he's on vacation or he's sick or something. So you always need to have backups in every single professional kind of piece or team member that you're going to use always.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we've learned how to underwrite. We found a broker. We've met with a lender. Now it's time to hire the attorney. So what's that process look like? I mean, obviously you're going to hire them to put together your proposal, purchase and sale agreement. I mean, attorneys will certainly help you negotiate, and I highly recommend that you have them assist you with negotiations, because alongside your broker, they're doing and negotiating more deals than you are on a daily basis, and so it really helps to have somebody that's sharp in that specific field of negotiation on your side. But Bruce, at what point do you engage your attorney? How did you find an attorney? What's that process look like?
Well, now for me, unfairly, I guess. Well, it's not unfairly. It goes back to that coach or that mentor. She had a network for me, and that's another benefit of working with these people. They've been doing this for a long time. As they're starting to teach you now, they have a database. They have a Rolodex, so to speak, that they're willing to share with you. So that's how I found my first real estate attorney. But on the real estate attorney, let's say you don't have anybody like that, or let's say you've gone to meetups and you've gotten a few different names. I think what you should be looking for in a real estate attorney is somebody that has practiced law in this space, not somebody that knows how to log into what's that called? That law thing. I forgot what it's
Like
called.
Legal Zoom or whatever?
Yeah, LegalZoom. Yeah, no, you don't want that. You don't want that at all. So you want somebody
No.
that is actually a practicing attorney, not that just, goes through LegalZoom to get answers. But you also want to make sure that they have experience in real estate. Not only in real estate, if you're trying to buy an apartment complex and they've only represented buyers in single family or mobile home parks, that's probably not a good fit because all the industries are slightly different. So if you're going to try to buy an apartment complex, find an attorney that has represented buyers in apartment complexes. It's very, very important. But the same thing goes. Do not only have one. It's come up many times. I've got my go-to. I love her to death. She's really, really good. We have a great working relationship. She understands exactly what I want in a purchase sale agreement. She knows my negotiating style, but two different times she's been out of pocket. She's been traveling. One time she was on her anniversary. Other times she's just too busy. She just doesn't have the bandwidth to take on another project right now because she's got tons of other clients. So you have to have a backup. So I always have backups that I can go to. These people, and let's talk about this a little bit too, is cost. They're not going to be cheap, right? They're going to be usually $250 to $500 per hour. At the beginning, you're very likely going to have to come up with a retainer, right? So if they think your project is going to cost $5,000 in legal fees, they may ask you for a $1,000 or $2,000 retainer. Once you've done that amount of work with them, they're going to ask you for more money, right? Once you've done a few deals with that one person or that one firm, they will usually waive the retainer and they will just settle up with you at the closing table. So they don't
Yep.
get paid until the deal closes. But again, my personal real estate attorney on each deal is going to we're going to run somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000 on average. I'm doing bigger deals. They're a little more complicated than just buying a 24 unit from mom and pop. So there's more negotiating, more haggling back and forth. There's more phone calls to be made. But for me, it's usually going to be about $5,000 or $10,000. I'm at a point where they're going to get paid at the closing table, so I don't have to front any of that money. But again, at the beginning, you're going to have to come up with some money out of pocket.
Yeah, it's all about the relationships. I mean, we just I've been using the same attorney for a while, and we just closed out a deal, 36 tenant shopping center, I think. I mean, imagine having to pay attorneys to go through 36 leases. That was not cheap, and not to mention everything else that an attorney has to do, the Alta survey, all the title commitments, all that kind of stuff. I mean, it was a $25,000 legal bill. I didn't get billed a dollar until we'd closed it because they knew me, they trusted me, they knew I was good for it. I mean, that can make a big difference, especially if you're a syndicator, right? And you're the one that's responsible for those pursuit costs. I mean, having an attorney wait until closing once you've gotten everybody else to pay you first and then you can pay them makes a pretty big difference in your personal cash flow. I would much rather have that than to have to come out of pocket, $1,000 every week or however often it is until I can get repaid. So I think, again, it comes down to relationship on all of these. You've got to have a great relationship with your broker, have a relationship with your lender, have a relationship with your attorney, because, the other thing is too, they can send you business or connect you with other clients who can bring you deals as well. So, I mean, that's a pretty critical point in this. But so, I mean, now you've kind of done the deal. I mean, I guess due diligence. We need to talk about due diligence because
Right. So you haven't done the deal. Well, let's back up. So if you're buying your own project by yourself, you're not going to syndicate it. Yeah, you're kind of sort of almost done. But if you are going to syndicate, there is another attorney you need involved. You need a syndication attorney. Sometimes you can find a firm or an individual attorney that can handle both sides of it, the contract negotiations and the creation of the private placement memorandum or the PPM. That's the syndication side of it. I don't go that route. There's nothing wrong with it. I just prefer specialization. So I go with two different attorneys. One that will help me draw up the syndication documents that I send out to my investors to sign. But I also have a real estate attorney on the other side. They're going to help me with the negotiations, creating the contract itself, and working us through the close process. So I want two different ones. On your syndication attorney, I think, first of all, you need to develop a relationship early on. As soon as you know you're going to do this, I am going to go out and buy properties. I know it's going to happen. I don't know how long it'll take to find my first one, maybe, but I know this is what I'm going to do. You need to start interviewing these people right now. You won't need them until you have a deal, sure, but you need to have an idea as to who to turn to when it's time. If you don't start looking for somebody until the time you go under contract and now you got to find a PPM attorney, a syndication attorney, it might be too late, So you got to get these people lined up in advance. But once you do have them lined up in advance, then you go out and start looking for deals. You find a deal. Your real estate attorney helps you construct the letter of intent, which is basically the high-level, non-binding document that says, look, I propose to buy your property. I propose to give you this amount of money for it. This will be down payment. This is how much loan I'm going to get to buy the property. This is how long I am wanting to take to inspect your property, or what's called the due diligence period. This is the amount of time I think it's going to take me to get all my funding in place. And this is my target close date. And this is how much earnest money I'm going to put up. It's all the high level basic parts of a contract. Once you get somebody to say, okay, I like that, I'm going to award the deal to you. I will, go with your LOI. Well, now that's when you start the formal negotiations for all the fine details in that contract. On your syndication attorney, once you find a deal, you're going to offer on it, and you have a very high level of confidence that you will get your LOI accepted. I go ahead and reach out to my syndication attorney right then. Okay, Fred, I'm ready to go. I'm putting in an LOI. I think I'm going to get it accepted. Let's go ahead and start. They're usually going to have a half hour to an hour phone call with you to figure out how you want to structure your deal. This is why getting yourself educated at the beginning is so critically important. Your attorney is not your teacher. They're not excuse me, they're not going to be your mentor or your coach. You need to know what you're talking about when you go to these people. They do not have time to teach you how to do this, but they're going to ask you, how do you want to structure your deal? Are you subordinate in your deal? Is it a return on or a return of? What is your promote going to be? How are you going to structure that promote? So there's lots of questions they're going to ask you that you need to kind of have an idea as to how you want to go. Now you can say, I plan to be subordinate on sale, but not on a refinance. And they go, well, it might not be a good idea to do it that way for this reason. Well, so then you can have an educated discussion with them. But again, you need to be educated before you go to them. Engage them when you have an LOI on the verge of being accepted. Because once you get an LOI accepted, it's going to take 1 to 3 weeks on average to get all the way worked through your contract. It's going to take your syndication attorney usually 2 to 3 weeks to pull all of your legal documents together. If you wait until the day you're under contract to start working with the syndication attorney, if it takes 3 weeks and you've only got a 3 or a 4 week due diligence period, oh my goodness, you're wasting a lot of time. A lot of that time that you should have been able to raise money, put money into the bank account to go purchase this deal, well, you've lost all that time. So you need to have your documents ready to go the day that the contract is signed and actually officially done. Because again, it can take them 2 to 3 weeks, and that's a lot of time you just can't afford to lose. So you got to get them involved pretty early on.
Yeah, I think that goes hand in hand with the cash raise, because you really can't start taking in any investor capital until you've gotten that put together. Otherwise, you'll find yourself in a gray area with the SEC, which we have talked about before and you don't want to do. And we found ourselves in that issue before too, where, I had the attorney put together the wrong docs for our agreement. We put together a 506C, and it was supposed to be a 506B, and he had just done it. This was my attorney contact, not Bruce's, but we had done a 506C the week before, several weeks before. And I just didn't think to say, hey, we're not doing a 506C this time, we're doing 506B. And so, of course, he spends 2-3 weeks putting these docs together for this project, and it was just wrong. And so we were literally collecting money the 2 days before closing. And you don't want to find yourself in that position because it's not fun. It's a little stressful, and it's something that you could honestly prepare for ahead of time, to where you don't have to face that.
And if you have that kind of an issue, you can always go to the seller and ask for an extension. They're going to be pissed, right? They're not going to be happy about it unless you communicated very, very early in the process that it's probably going to have to be extended. They're still not going to be happy, but at least you gave them some warning. If you drop this on them at the last minute, 2 to 4 days before closing, they could just tell you, no, you failed to perform. I choose not to sell to you. I'm taking it back away from you, and I'm going to take your earnest money. You didn't perform.
Yeah.
You said you would have it closed by, say, November 13th. On November 11th, you said, oh, man, I can't do it. Well, you know what? The contract will usually say how much advance notice you have to give the seller that I may need an extension. It's usually going to be 5 to 10 business days. If you drop that ball on them 2 days before, they have every legal right to say, go to hell, go away, leave me alone. Haha, I'm going to take your earnest money. They're entitled to it because you did not follow the contract, right? You failed to perform, and they're going to exercise that clause in the contract. You're just shit out of luck. If you put up 1% on $1 million deal, $10,000 is gone. So be careful. Be very, very careful on that stuff. But yeah, you got to understand what's going on at the beginning, so what Tyler said, that it wasn't the attorney's fault in any way. There was it was something that was missed in the process that we filed as a 506C. The people that we were going to have bring the money to the table to invest in the deal, they said, oh, we told all of our investors it's going to be a 506B. So some of my investors are not accredited. We filed as a 506C, meaning they have to be accredited or they can't
It's
invest.
a problem.
So it was just an honest mistake. No worries. But what it did, it slowed us down. We did have to get an extension on that property. And if you get an extension to the close, if they do agree to it, and you did follow all the timelines in the contract, also in the contract, very often they're going to say, if you have to extend, it's going to cost you another $25,000 or another $100,000 in purchase price. They're going to make an extension painful as shit to you because they don't want you to extend. They want you to be a professional and execute on what you say you're going to do. They're professionals. They don't want to be jerked around by somebody that doesn't know what they're doing. So they're usually going to have some very painful clauses in there. So don't get yourself into that situation.
Yeah, I mean, we had to pay $5,000 that was not applicable to the purchase price to get that extension. Which, it's like, okay, well, either we pay this $5,000 or we lose the 18 in earnest money. We close 2 weeks later. We figure it out. So I mean, $5,000, whatever. But it's part of it. You got to be ready for that. So after you've gone through documents with your attorney, you've got your real estate attorney, you've got your syndication attorney. Then it's time to do your due diligence, and this is the part where experienced investors and developers really shine, because if you don't do this correctly, you could miss something that could end up costing you the entire investment. And I don't mean that as in like, oh, the investment's going to go away. I just mean you could lose all of your money because you didn't see, termites for whatever reason. You just didn't have an inspector come out. You didn't see the termites, and the whole place has to be torn down or replaced or whatever. I actually put together a due diligence checklist. I'll leave a link below in the description. But there are 5 main sectors of due diligence. There's environmental, financial, legal, operational, and physical. And some of this covers a little bit of what we've already talked about. So like financial, right? I mean, Bruce was talking about 2 years of tax returns and K-1s and personal financial statements and all that kind of stuff that the banks will need. We've already talked about legal. We obviously just covered that. But there's things like physical. Get your property management team out there. Have them lay eyes on it. What do they think is going to need to be done? Get your property inspector out there. What do they think needs to be done? Check on the MEP, the mechanical, electrical, plumbing. You want to make sure that the building is not, going to need a serious overhaul. On the operational side, Bruce is really good at this, at looking at how current property management companies are running the property, or even asset managers, and seeing, okay, well, they're paying too much here. They're paying too much here. We can decrease, operational expenses by 5% on this side. And I mean, there are deals where you can come in and the value add has nothing to do with the physical attributes of the building. It just has to do with operational, right? Because that's the beautiful thing about commercial and multifamily real estate. It's based on the NOI. So obviously environmental, that can be traffic studies, but it can also be asbestos and lead paint. You got to get in there and check all that stuff. I mean, banks won't lend if you've got a building that's full of lead paint, and you've got to abate that. I mean, that's a problem. So you want to make sure that you don't find yourself getting to the end of your due diligence period and then all of a sudden having to come out of pocket for all of this stuff.
Yeah, where this really becomes crazy important is if you're going to do something all cash, do things all cash if you choose. There's not necessarily anything wrong with it. You'll get a higher return if you put debt on it. Some people just don't like debt. Totally fine. But if you're going to do something all cash, you damn well better do this very, very, very thoroughly. If you go with a lender, they are going to have their own teams look at it. You're going to look at it, but they're also going to send people out. They're going to send engineers out very often. They're going to send out their own inspectors, and they're going to crawl all over it too, because they are your biggest partner in this deal. If you get an 80% loan, basically a 20% down payment, that means the bank owns 80% of this project. You only own 20% of it, right? So you got to think about that they're going to come out there and they're going to crawl all over it, and they might find things that you didn't find, which is good. It's kind of a rude awakening sometimes because you didn't plan on what they found. You only raised enough money for the things that you found. But there is safety in knowing that there is somebody else in this deal looking it over. So if you do it without a lender, you pay all cash. You had better do all of these things. Get an environmental study done, or a phase 1. You need to get the survey done. You need to get the, well, you're not going to be able to close with a survey, but you need to get all the inspections done. You need to make sure that, it appraises properly. Even though you don't have a lender involved, you still need to do that appraisal. because you need to know if I'm going to buy something for $5 million and it really only appraises for two, how the hell are you ever going to sell it? Because the next person might not pay cash. They might have to get a loan. And if they get a loan on something that's $3 million overvalued in the eyes of the lender, you're never going to sell that property. So it's very important that if you're going to do it without a lender involved, you have got to really pay attention to this stuff. And it can get a little scary because you don't have that extra set of eyes on the deal with you.
You know, lenders can be honestly annoying when it comes to their requirements, but it's all stuff that you should really be doing for the benefit of the project anyway. And that's the thing that you need to tell yourself. Like, yeah, I mean, is this lender asking way too many questions? Quite possibly, but also they're coming out of pocket for the majority of the deal. I mean, they are technically your biggest investor, right? They're just not taking a chunk of equity. And so they've got to be sure that what they're putting their money down for is going to make sense and is a viable, good project. And so if a lender's asking you for stuff, it's also so that they can make sure that you have a successful project because their interests are very much aligned with yours. So,
yep. It's true. And so, a little more detail on the due diligence period. In multifamily, it's usually going to be anywhere from 21 to 30 days. 30 days was typical until about 5 to 10 years ago when the market heated up so wildly for multifamily across the country. Now we're in a seller's market, and a lot of times to get a deal, you're going to have to shorten that to 21 days. And it's not uncommon. Now, Tyler,
that's crazy.
You said, wow, because in commercial, I'm learning that's usually more like 60 days.
Yeah, at least. I mean, it depends on the project, right? So if you're doing development, whether you're doing commercial or multifamily development, I mean, you're going to be going on a much longer timeline anyway, right? I mean, we've got a project under contract right now that's raw land, and it's already fully zoned, so they don't even have to go through rezoning. So rezoning obviously would add on even more time to this timeline. They've had it under contract since the end of the summer or midsummer. And they have until June. They could close as early as February. The outside close date is in June to close, just because it's a development deal. Now, if you're looking at smaller commercial buildings, you're probably in that 60 to 90 days of due diligence plus 30 to close, typically 15 to 30 to close. So, yeah, I mean, it's a much, much longer timeline than what you're looking at in multifamily. Now, it's a bit of a different beast, right? I mean, in multifamily, you don't have to go through every single lease on that property, typically, right? I mean, I'm sure you do sometimes.
But they're all the same.
Right. You've got to go back and verify. Whereas, when I said I had my attorneys go through 36 leases, they were 36 different leases because Family Dollar comes in, well, they're doing their lease form. Dollar General comes in, they're doing their lease form. So it's you're not going to have the consistency that makes it relatively easy to go through and review everything. So it just takes more time. So yeah, I mean, it's funny that there's such a big difference. And also multifamily seems to be a little more competitive. I mean, in commercial, you don't typically see projects just going up for bid with whisper prices and, it's going to the most competitive group, right?
Yeah, multifamily. Yeah, that was something that I had to learn early on. I was like, well, where's the price? There's no price. What do you mean there's no price? How do I know if I want to buy it?
Yeah.
You just put in an offer. It's like, okay.
It's so frustrating.
And maybe
on
you're the
our end.
highest. Maybe you're not. Like, well, okay, this sucks. I don't like this, but I had a great mentor and coach. So she said, no, that's just the way it's working right now. So, yep, 90% of the deals are going to hit the market with no price attached to it. Now, you start developing a relationship in the industry and they will give you a whisper. Say, look, the whisper price is they're asking $5 million. Realistically, it's probably going to trade or sell at 4.8. And then so at least now you have something to work from. But no, there is no, price. Because if there was a price, somebody could come in and say, look, I'll give you that price. Okay, we're done. No, they always want this to go through a bid process. So whisper price is 5. We think it'll trade at 4.8, but now you're going to create a bidding situation that you might have 5 or 10 people bid this thing up to 5.5 million. That's what they want, right? So yeah, it is a lot more competitive in multifamily. And then even if you get to where you're like one of the top 2, 3, or 4 offers on the table, they get 10 and they whittle it down to say 3. They're going to go to best and final, and they're going to say, okay, you are one of the three we're going to carry into the best and final round, Bruce. What is your very best dollar? Okay, now I got to come up with that amount. So I submit that amount. And what will often happen is they're going to go to those three people, those three last groups in best and final, and the seller will actually have a phone interview with you. If that scares you to death, you might not want to do this because it happens, I would say, on more than half the deals that I buy. I have to be interviewed on the phone with the selling broker and the seller themselves. I've never once lost if I went to an interview process because I know how to talk to them. I know what their pain points are, and I know how to address those pain points in this interview. But understand that there's a high likelihood you are going to have to go through an interview process. Then they're going to look at the interview. They're going to look at your dollars bid, and they're going to look at your terms. Maybe I say I only need a 21-day inspection period where everybody else says I need a 45-day inspection period. Or everybody says, I'll give you the typical 1% earnest money. Well, Bruce says, I'll give you 2% earnest money. So instead of, maybe $100,000 in earnest money, maybe I'm putting up $200,000 in earnest money. I might say, look, I'm going to put up $200,000 in earnest money. 100,000 of that is going to be hard day one, meaning if I pull out of this deal for any reason at all, you get that $100,000 no matter what. Everybody else says, look, I'll give you 200,000, but I'm not going hard on any money until the conclusion of my inspection period. Well, I'm a little stronger because I'm going with a 21-day inspection period instead of a 45 maybe. I'm going to go hard on $100,000. Nobody else is willing to do that. I might say I can close in 45 days. Everybody else is saying 60 days. So there's a lot of weight given to terms, and that's where your real estate attorney is going to come in to play for you. But you're going to have to go through all these things. It's not just based on price. It's based on your ability. Something fell behind my head. That was weird.
I was going to say, what was that?
I think it was my soundproofing. I think that here just pried out all the adhesive on that thing. It fell. That's funny. But yeah, so there's a lot involved. And again, this is why you need to have an attorney that is very experienced in what you're trying to do.
I think it's so funny how different that multifamily is from commercial. Because if a building in commercial goes to market without a price, it's like, screw you, man. I'm not going to come appraise your building for you. I'm not going to put all that work into it. It's not worth my time. Now, obviously on the very big buildings, like when the Fifth Third Tower went to market here in Nashville, it sold for, over $120 million. Where they're not going to say, hey, we're taking it to market at $120 million. It's an unlisted price, but you call them and they say, look, it's $120. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of, I guess it's kind of a whisper because the number's not officially out there. But it's not really like a bidding kind of scenario war like you guys get into.
Right. Yep. Totally different. But, they both work. Mine's a little more frustrating sometimes because I don't know exactly. Because, again, if there's a posted price, say, hey, I'll give you the $2 million deal, and we're done. Now we just got to work out the details in the contract.
Right. Exactly. Well, I mean, that's pretty much rounding up the hour and a half. Bruce, do you have any parting tips for preparing for your first deal?
Again, you got to be working on your investors from day one. And if you ever think there's going to be another deal after this deal, you can't stop raising money. You're always networking, raising money, working on your investor database. So that's always going to happen. But you gotta get your education. You need a good coach or a mentor. And you need to have these professionals around you and start interviewing these professionals before you truly need them. Because once you need them, it's probably too late to get them, right? You don't have enough time. So you got to start working on this thing early on. So once you know I'm going to syndicate or I'm going to go out and buy real estate, figure out what team members that we've talked about you need on your team for what you're trying to do. And you got to start getting them lined up immediately. Once you have them lined up, it might take you a month or two to find the actual deal, maybe even 6 months or a year. But now you know exactly who to turn to the second you need them, and you can get on their books.
Yeah, that's great advice. I would just say get out there and do the damn thing. I mean, quit sitting around and waiting and hoping something else is going to fall out of the sky. I mean, honestly, you'll never get rolling until you make that first push. So just get out there and do it. All right, guys, we'll see y'all next week.
See you.